Joining me with more on the obstacles for the White House, Ian Bremmer is president and founder of Eurasia Group and G0 Media. Ian, where does this leave the bargaining position of Russia and China? Do the events of the past 24 hours have something to do with one another?
Well, first, on the bargaining position of China, you may remember on the U.S.-Iran talks, the Americans were saying they would direct, the Iranians were saying no, and then it turned out that they were indirect, but there was a meeting between the two at the end, so both had some plausible way to say they weren't lying. I think the same thing is happening here. You know, we have a significant Chinese delegation in town in Washington for the IMF meetings. There are G20 formats in the course of those meetings where both the Americans and the Chinese at high levels are participating, and they're not ignoring each other. So there aren't any direct bilateral meetings, but there is engagement. There is talk. And in that regard, I think the Americans and Chinese can kind of both get away with spinning that reality in a slightly different way. And that explains why you have conflicting headlines here. Russia's a different story. And of course, the fact that Trump has been using a lot of carrot and stick on Russia and Ukraine to get to a ceasefire, but almost all of the stick has been against the Ukrainians, effectively, by the way, while the carrot has been with Russia. And that's not worked very well. And Putin's certainly not accepting a ceasefire at this point. And Trump has to decide whether he's okay with that, and he's going to walk away and he'll blame both sides, somewhat implausibly, or is he going to start to become impatient and start to actually, like, whacking around the Russians and saying there are going to be consequences. There will be an or else if you're the ones that don't get me a deal. So
in the Post, you know, he said, Vladimir, stop. There was no explicit or else. But are we going to have to get to that point? And this comes at precisely the moment when we're all kind of reflecting on the dollar's reserve status and our ability to, you know, use it to apply international sanctions, including against Russia. And maybe the reports are that we're going to back down on that as well in hopes for a deal. But what would if you don't stop, then what? What do you think the next, you know, consequence might be?
If they don't stop and there's no or else, then Trump is likely to back away, as Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, has already said, and Trump has implied. And he'll blame both. He'll find a way to blame both. It won't just be Putin. He'll probably walk away from support for Ukraine, but he's also going to walk away from a rapprochement with Russia. And frankly, that's not the worst possible scenario for the Europeans or the Ukrainians, who are going to continue to provide an awful lot of support for reconstruction and all the rest. But if there is an or else, it's going to have to be credible. It's going to have to be sufficient consequence that Putin feels like he needs to take it seriously. And we're not close to that moment at this point. So nobody, I think, involved in the talks thinks that we're nearing a ceasefire agreement soon.